So yeah, welcome everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today for the Farmers for Solar webinar. We're going to talk a little bit about how you can support solar in Wisconsin. I'm Chelsea Chandler. I'm the Climate, Energy, and Air Program Director at Clean Wisconsin, which is a statewide org. We've been around for over 50 years, and we work to combat climate change and pollution in our air, water, and land, and ensure a healthy future for every Wisconsin community. I also wear another hat. I am a farmer in Driftless, Wisconsin. My husband and I run a community-supported agriculture farm where we grow about 50 different types of certified organic produce. So this question of, large-scale solar is something that is very near and dear to my heart. It very much comes at the intersection of my work at Clean Wisconsin and in my farming community and in a lot of conversations with my neighbors. So I'm really excited to be part of this work and, sharing information and, asking and answering questions, and really appreciate you all being part of this today. We recently launched a Farmers for Solar initiative in partnership with Renewing the Countryside. Our goal really is to help share information about solar, including community-wide benefits, help people get their thoughtful questions answered, and be able to share their thoughts publicly. We hosted an awesome solar tour earlier this month up in Black River Falls. That's what this photo is from. We got to visit 2 different solar farms where we saw pollinator habitat, sheep grazing, and I know some of the people attending today who joined us a few weeks ago up there too. So very much appreciate you all coming back. I also want to introduce our other hosts today, or let them introduce themselves. So first I will toss it over to my colleague Amy to say hi.
Hey everybody, and welcome. My name is Amy Barrio. I'm Communications Director at Clean Wisconsin. So that means I oversee our media relations, our social media, our video production, our website, our podcasts, and our quarterly newsletter, among other things. And so I'll be talking with you a little bit later about ways to communicate around solar projects in your areas.
Thank you, Amy. And now Katie, who's our partner in Farmers for Solar and also running the tech today.
Great. Hi, everyone. Thanks so much for being here. It's great to see so many familiar faces here today. I'm Katie Demetz, Program Manager at Renewing the Countryside, and we work across Wisconsin, Minnesota, and Iowa in partnership with rural and also urban farmers, landowners, communities, and organizations on a wide variety of conservation, agriculture, and regional food systems initiatives with the goal of creating more just, vibrant, and sustainable rural communities. We're excited to be doing this work in partnership with Clean Wisconsin and engage with all of you today. Just moving quickly into a couple of just tech notes. Feel free to put your questions in the chat or in the Q&A whenever today, and we will take them at the end. And the chat is disabled, so the Q&A is going to be that main form of communication. I believe you can also, we'll just go with that.
All right, thanks, Katie. So what we're planning on covering today, wanted to start out by talking about some key benefits of solar. These are potentially some talking points that you could use if you wanted to, say, submit a public comment or write an op-ed. And we're going to talk about those things too. So after some of the key points, I'll walk through how to actually navigate the Public Service Commission website to submit a public comment and get some more information about projects. And then I'll toss it over to Amy, who's going to focus a little bit on, what does it mean to be a trusted messenger, some tips for writing a compelling op-ed, and how to engage productively on social media. No, really, there's science behind, how you can engage in a way that is helpful and is not just, arguing with each other. And then we'll reserve some time at the end for Q&A. So like Katie mentioned, feel free to type your questions into that Q&A feature as we're going, and we'll get to as many as we can at the end. So Wisconsin solar future. Solar farms are essential to Wisconsin being able to transition to a clean energy economy. One thing that I hear a lot is, well, we need more energy efficiency, or we just need to put more solar panels on roofs. And those are absolutely part of the solution. And in fact, we should always start with energy efficiency. It's, cost saving. It's the first smartest thing that we should do. We do need more solar on roofs. That is kind of blurry, but a picture of the solar system being installed on my barn roof at my farm. But those alone are not going to get us where we need to go. There was a recent analysis for the state of Wisconsin that looked at what does it take to actually get that clean energy transition to net zero carbon economy by 2050. That's a goal that we have that a lot of states have set. That is a goal that a lot of utilities are looking at too, of decarbonizing their electricity supply. And just looking at the math, we need to build over 1,000 megawatts of solar every year in Wisconsin to reach that goal. Solar farms that have been approved to date in Wisconsin range from 1 megawatt, which is kind of the base definition of a large scale project, up to 300 megawatts. So you can see we'll need a variety of projects at different sizes to meet that annual need for clean energy. Just a few numbers at a glance. Solar is 100 times more efficient per acre than corn ethanol. I'll get into that in a moment. To break this down also into a kind of relatable unit, I think most farmers and rural landowners have a good sense of, what an acre is. So 1 acre of solar can power about 80 Wisconsin homes. And then there's $5,000 per megawatt that goes to hosting local communities of large scale projects. And I'll get into that in a moment as well. But again, high level, solar is cheaper than coal and gas. Wind is even cheaper than that. Can help support energy independence. It's very safe. It's a safe technology for our health and our environment. Can provide good pollinator habitat, can help rebuild soil health, and offer some real economic opportunities, both for individual farmers and for rural communities more broadly. And again, I'll dig into all of this in a minute. So let's start with the economic factors. So, if you're a farmer or a rural landowner and you sign a lease to host a big solar project on your property, you are getting that money directly, and that is stable and long-term income. We're talking, multiple decades, say 30 plus years in that lease, and that you've got a set price for that. So that's something that is not volatile. It's not dependent on what a bushel of corn is going for in a given year. So that stable income is a really helpful way to diversify income streams on a farm. And, again, I mentioned I'm a CSA farmer. I grow like 50 different crops. And so I know having that diversification built into a farm model is really key. We've got a quote there by farmer Jay Wendt. He's one of our farmers for solar, and he talks about how just that consistency of solar income has been a real lifeline on his farm, where he grows a number of row crops and vegetable crops. So I think, a decent number of people understand that if you're a farmer, you get that lease and that income directly. But I think less folks are familiar with the community-wide benefits. And that's namely in Wisconsin, under state law, the local governments that are hosting a utility-owned solar project or a developer-owned solar project that's over 50 megawatts get $5,000 per megawatt every year from the state's utility aid fund. This amount actually increased. It used to be $4,000, and as of this year, it increased to $5,000. So that's really significant, because that's an annual amount. Just to give a little example, for a 300 megawatt project, which is again kind of on the bigger end of what we've seen, or is the bigger end of what we've seen approved so far in Wisconsin, that is $1.5 million that is going directly into those communities for 30 years. And that's really a blank check for the local governments. You can use it to repair roads. We've heard good stories about that, invest in infrastructure, you know, support your volunteer fire department or other emergency services, or what, basically it's up to the community how they want to use that. It just goes into their budget. So that's a really important economic benefit that's coming from these projects directly. And so I mentioned that stat about the efficiency of solar. And so I think that this is a really important point too, because I think a big concern that is on a lot of people's minds, and especially on farmers' minds, is, you know, how does solar fit in with agriculture? And it turns out solar is actually a very efficient source of energy that we can grow here in Wisconsin. I think a lot of people usually equate agriculture with food. And it very much is food, but it is a lot more than that. And so I like to remind people that, you know, agriculture is really about growing food, feed, fiber, and fuel. And acre for acre, solar farms can produce 100 times more energy than corn grown for ethanol. Our science director at Clean Wisconsin did a really detailed analysis on this last year. There's a link in the bottom there, and there's a picture of the report, which you can find on our website if you're interested in kind of digging into the methodology and everything. But pretty staggering outcome was that it was 100 times higher. We grow a lot of corn for ethanol in Wisconsin right now. There's about 4 million acres of corn that we grow. 1 million of those, or a quarter, is for ethanol. And so if you do a little math, you could see that if you put solar on just a third of the acres that we're already using for fuel here in Wisconsin on our ag land, we could meet all of the demand we need for a net zero economy. And then we could free up, you know, that other 2/3 of land for food as well. So I think that this is just a really important perspective. You know, we're not trying to choose winners or losers or anything, but just kind of looking at the comparison between the two ways of growing energy on our prime ag land. You know, farmers like to maximize yield, and so this is a pretty big improvement. Solar can also support energy independence. You know, I mentioned this is a homegrown product. Every year, Wisconsin is sending $14 billion roughly out of state, and that's to import fossil fuels. We don't have coal mines here. We don't have gas resources here. So we're paying to import all of that. But, you know, we do have abundant sunshine here. Even though we're a more northern climate, we've got plenty to make solar a very efficient and cost-effective technology. So that's a way that we can, you know, keep more money in state and use that to reinvest in our communities. Solar also can support a healthy environment. So by you know, replacing some of the conventional agriculture, at times if there's row crops that are very reliant on pesticides, on fertilizer, you've got a lot of NPK that you're applying on the land every year. You can avoid some of that when you've got a perennial ground cover, and that's letting the land rest. That comes with some other benefits. So solar farms that have native grasses and flowers planted among the panels can really improve water quality, actually, and quantity. Just a couple recent examples of that where Clean Wisconsin did some analysis and proposed projects. For the Koshkonong Solar project, we actually found out that the project would reduce the phosphorus runoff in the area by 96% across the project site. It would avoid 100,000 pounds of phosphorus pollution during the project life. And that was really important because the Koshkonong Creek that's in the project area was listed as an impaired water body for phosphorus pollution by the DNR. So that means that it's harmful for aquatic life and was fueling algal growth, for example. Another recent example in the Vista Sands solar project that was proposed in the Central Sands. It's an area of the state where there's some serious concerns over aquifer levels, where there's been a lot of drilling, use of high capacity wells in the area to irrigate a lot of land, and that's actually drying up lakes and rivers and streams. And so An analysis showed that Vista Sands would take 56 of those high capacity wells out of normal operation, and that's 20% of the water withdrawal in that whole greater Buena Vista area. And 2 billion gallons of waters that those wells would pump in a dry year for the aquifer. So it can have some really real meaningful impacts on the water as well for the project area. Again, it's going to regenerate soil health by allowing that land to rest with perennial cover and less tillage, keeping more carbon, more organic matter in the soil, allowing it to build up. And then the flowers can provide really great habitat for pollinators. I included what is my current favorite picture, which was from the solar tour a few weeks ago, where we were checking out one of the projects where there was great pollinator habitat. You can see in that picture some blazing star in the front, some vervain it looks like, and I couldn't even take a selfie without getting photobombed by a bumblebee. So just good evidence that, it really is, it's not, a dead zone or industrial wasteland. There are really great ways to integrate that pollinator habitat and healthy ground cover into projects. So those are just kind of a quick overview of some of the benefits of solar that folks might want to highlight. And now I just want to walk through fairly quickly how the PSC approval process works, and then how you can actually go about submitting a comment on a project that's up for approval. So in Wisconsin, projects that are over 100 megawatts apply for approval through the Public Service Commission. It is a rigorous process. It can last roughly between 6 months to a year, and that involves a thorough environmental review. It involves both public and technical hearings. There's expert testimony, groups that intervene officially so they can provide some of that testimony, and then opportunities for input from the public. So specifically, the public can write comments. You can do that online, and I'll show you how to do that in a minute, or you can show up at a public hearing and speak. And those are comments that go into the record. They're reviewed by the Public Service Commission commissioners, who are basically the deciders of whether a project is going to get approved, denied, or modified. So I just took a series of screenshots because I thought it'd be cleaner than me trying to navigate the website live. But I included the URLs at the bottom there. So this is basically the homepage for the PSC. If you go to psc.wi.gov. There's multiple ways to get to the page where you write a comment, and there's also a lot of information about current projects and ways to subscribe to get updates if you want to follow what's going on in a given project. So I'll walk through some of that, and then I'll give you sort of the really simple shortcut at the end too, if you want that. So right on the landing page, there's these kind of boxes. They've reorganized the website so it's a little easier to navigate. So if you go to the public participation box and click on there, and I'm sorry, I know this is a little bit small, but I'm going to talk through everything. But this is basically laying out how you can participate just as a member of the public. So one thing that you can do is you can follow a case by accessing the case file basically through the PSC's case management system. So if you click on that search cases button, you'll get to this page, the case management system. And you're basically just trying to find the project that you're interested in. So there's, I'd say a couple ways I would recommend to do that. One is by typing in the docket number. That's where it says case at the top, and there's 3 different sections of it. So to do that, you need to have the docket number handy. If you don't have that handy, you can also search by keywords. So if you know like the name of the project, you can type that in and search. There's also another way to find it from a list of cases, from the highlighted cases. So I'll go over that in just a minute. But for now, if you did have the docket number, you could find it from the keyword, you pull up the case. This is what it looks like. So here's just one example. You can see the docket numbers there. It's 9820-CE-100. It talks about what the project is. And then there's all these tabs at the top. I think especially noteworthy is this documents tab. If you click on that and click on all documents, takes you this page, and that's basically all of the documents that are part of a file. So you'll see here, there's a number of public comments. So when you submit a public comment, this is where it goes. So it is publicly visible. It basically gets added to this online record for the project. But you can also see testimony that any of the expert interveners included. You can see memos from the PSC staff. So it's kind of everything about the case is all in one place right here. So going back to that public participation page, we walked through, how you can go in to see a specific case. You can also subscribe to a case file if you want to get updates, but you don't want to keep going back and checking for them. So if you click on that second button under subscribe to a case file, it takes you to IRF. There's all kinds of fun acronyms with the PSC. So IRF is the Electronic Records Filing System. And this part at the right here that's circled is to subscribe. So you do need the docket number for that. So you would have had to look it up first. Then you put in that 3-part number, your email address. You have to confirm it with a one-time code that'll get sent to you. And then you are subscribed to the docket. So you'll get email notifications. They send them in batches. So when there are new documents added, if people add public comments, that kind of thing, you'll get an update if you subscribe to that. And then here, this is the most important one. This is what I want to focus on, is how to write a comment. So again, back on this public participation page, you can go into this file a comment online button. So that's going to take you to this page that has all of the projects that have open public comment periods right now. So there's a long table. You can scroll down and find the project that you're interested in, and then click that file a comment button. I do also want to flag at the top, there's it's that first arrow where it says additional information. There are some suggestions for creating an effective comment. So there's some good tips in there too about how to identify yourself, talk about sort of your relationship to the docket, meaning like you're interested in the project, you live in the area, how to be specific, kind of explain the basis for your opinion and things like that. So if you click on the file comment, again, this is just an example I pulled up, but basically you'll get to this form. So you just have to type in, your name, where you're from, and then there's that big box there to write your comment in. If you want, you can type it up ahead of time and then copy it in, or else you can just kind of draft it live in there, confirm you're not a robot, file it, and then that's it. It goes into the record. One other way to get to some project information and to file a comment is back on the home page. You can go into this highlighted cases section at the bottom left there. And there's a map that you can scroll around and look at the various projects that are proposed for construction in Wisconsin. And then there's a list of all the cases that are under review. So there's a lot of information in there. It includes the docket number if you're looking for that, as well as a link to get there. There's a project map. Let's see, there we go. So you can see a map of the project and exactly where it is. There's a summary of the application, talks about the size, what kind of acreage you're talking. Lists the proposed schedule for the project and for construction, and then includes the application itself. So you can really get at a lot of project specific information if you wanted to learn some more about a project before you're submitting a comment. And then at the bottom, there's these boxes. And so it's got some key info, like, again, if you want to subscribe to the docket, when the public hearing dates are, and then there's that section for public comments, and that's going to take you back where we already walked through how you file the comment specifically. And then I will wrap up by saying one more way to stay in the loop, and maybe the easiest way, is you could just sign up for our action network. There's the link right there. It's just cleanwisconsin.org/join our action network. That way you will get emails directly from us on opportunities to engage in supporting important solar projects. as well as other advocacy opportunities around clean energy and clean water and clean air. But that's a way to get the link directly. So usually when we send that out to our network, you say, you know, look, right now there's an open public comment period at the PSC in the project. Here are some basic facts about the project, some things that you could mention if you want to, and here's the link, and it'll take you right to that form to fill out so you can avoid navigating the PSC website. But I did want to make sure to show everybody that, because I think it is very rich with information. And if you, for those of you who do want to have more engagement, to kind of understand all the project details and kind of the updates as they're coming in, that's a way to do that. But if you want to be more hands-off, you can just subscribe, and we'll let you know when there's an opportunity to jump in. So with that, I want to turn it over to Amy.
Hey, thanks. And just so people know, Chelsea's going to still be running my slides, so I'll be calling out to change slides as we go through this. So part of this Farmers for Solar initiative is about building a community of advocates. And to do that, I think we need to understand kind of like how human beings work a little bit. The first thing to understand is we use emotion more than facts to make decisions. We're an emotional species. It's kind of how we operate. We trust the people we know, and we believe the people we trust. So when somebody we trust tells us something, we don't go back and fact check. We believe it. And we're social creatures. That's how we operate. Next slide. So what can you do to become a part of this building of community of advocates? The first is to become a trusted source. One of those people who, community members look to and talk to. And the second is to push back against misinformation. Next slide. So to become a trusted source, again, this is the way people work. We are more likely to trust people who are similar to us. So people within our community, our peers, our friends, our neighbors, our coworkers, and our community leaders like teachers, doctors, church leaders, farmers, and business owners. Next slide. This becomes even more important in small communities where relationships really matter. We all want to conform to the norms of our community. We want to be liked and accepted, and we want this sense of belonging and group identity. And this all comes into play as we think about who is a trusted source. Next slide. So long story short, you have the power to influence your community because you are a part of that community. You are a trusted, honest, credible source. You are a neighbor, a friend, a colleague. So your voice is important, and that counts for every single one of us, but especially people who live in smaller communities where a lot of these projects are going to be cited. Next source, or next slide. So what you can do is use your voice, and that entails a few different things. The first is to be a part of the conversation. So talk to your friends and neighbors and colleagues. Have these conversations as projects come into your area. The second is to show up. I think we all know it's a lot easier to be against something than to be for something, especially when that something involves a lot of change. And so you'll find that when there start to be meetings from a developer or meetings in front of local governments about projects, the people who show up are the people who are against the projects. Those are the most vocal folks. But it doesn't mean that everybody in a community is against something. It's just you get more fired up when you're against a thing, and we're all like that. So to use your voice means to show up in those spaces and to show that there is a diversity of opinion out there. And then finally, you can use communications tools like local newspapers and social media. Next slide. So your local paper, you probably have a small local paper that serves your community. And these papers run letters to the editors and op-eds. Those are slightly different things. Like a letter to the editor is like, dear editor, I feel this way, thank you, Amy. Like it is a letter. An op-ed is more of a guest column, so it can be a little bit longer. But chances are, for sure, your local paper will take a letter to the editor from you. Just because they like that kind of content, and they welcome it, and that's every paper. So what you should do is figure out what is the publication that serves your community. What's the one that you'll find in the coffee shops, in the grocery stores, on kitchen tables, and look in that publication and find the contact information and reach out and ask for guidelines for letters to the editors and op-eds or guest columns, just so you know the kinds of things they look for, especially the length. So if you're writing a letter to the editor, the important thing is to keep it short. So around 300 words is around what you want to be. The state journal's guidelines, for example, are 200 words for a letter to the editor. So that is extremely short. And that will help you stick to like one major point in your letter to the editor. You just want to kind of get something across simply and clearly. But it's important to use your voice, again, your relevant experience, your perspective on an issue, because this is coming from you. And publications really like that. They want to try to reflect the voices of their communities. And then use clear, conversational, and straightforward language. This is not a research paper. You don't have to do a ton of citing or anything. It's really like, hey, I'm in this community, and here's what I think or feel, and here's why. So that's a simple way to use your voice, to get into the paper that other folks in your community are reading, and share your perspective. Next slide. This can be scary for some people, the pushing back against misinformation. And I get it, because, the internet can be and social media can be a rough place. But I want to point out that misinformation has existed since human beings could talk to each other. So we're always encountering misinformation in our conversations with people, in letters to the editor, in all kinds of spaces. But social media has helped it get big, spread faster and further. So there are some research-backed things that you can do to push back against misinformation, simple corrections that you can make. So if you're on your social media feed and you see something that is wrong or misleading or doesn't include all the facts, here's what you can do. Okay, so you see it in your feed, and maybe all the comments too are like, yeah, right on, I agree, or also full of misinformation. You can just leave a simple comment that says, hey, I don't think this is right. Here's what, is the real information. And then if you can, cite your source or leave a link to a credible source if possible. And your audience for that is not the person who posted, and it's not the other people who are like, yep, we agree, right on. It is for the person who's just scrolling through. And there are many more of those folks than the people who are actually writing comments. And so you want to show those folks who are just scrolling like, hey, this, you shouldn't necessarily believe this. Because if you don't do that, then people who are just scrolling through, they see one comment and they see a bunch of other people saying, yep, then they're like, okay, that must be right. And they may not even consciously think that way, but that is the impact. So the thing that you can do is offer a simple correction just once. Don't argue. I would say, come back and check to see what people are saying in response, because sometimes it's not great. But that one simple act can really change the dynamic of the post and offer somebody who is just looking at the post another perspective. And what we find at Clean Wisconsin is if we do that, or if we have a post where people are commenting a bunch of really negative things, even just putting in a positive, like, oh, but I like this solar project, will allow more people to feel comfortable saying they support it too. So if we say something that, about a project and people are like, boo, I don't like this. And then one person is like, oh, but this is good because of this. And then other people will be like, yeah, that's right, it is good. And so you're just kind of offering that little change to the discussion, and offering a couple of facts that people can see and learn. Don't argue, don't get caught in back and forth. again, you're speaking to the more silent crowd that's just scrolling through. And that can help slow the spread of misinformation. Next slide. So this is an example of that. This is a response to a post about solar. It says, cool, thanks for covering good land that could be farmland or a place for a home. Why not put solar on top of buildings and over the top of parking lots? That doesn't really even feel like misinformation. It's just like, hey, why aren't we doing this? Next slide. But you see, we get this a lot. Would be easier to support putting solar panels on houses, warehouses, etc., not on farmland. And then this starts to become misinformation, right? It's like a false choice. Like we could either put solar on tops of houses and parking lots, or we could put it on top of farmland. Like, why are you choosing the farmland one when you should just be choosing this other thing? And that is misinformation. We know that if that were the case, if we could just put it on houses and just like, we're good, we wouldn't be having this conversation right now. So next slide. So this is how Clean Wisconsin responds when we see that. Large-scale solar farms are substantially more efficient than rooftop solar, both in terms of generation and cost. For the same installed capacity, utility-scale solar can generate 50% more energy at less than half the cost of rooftop solar. So this is what we use to push back. It's very facty. It's not emotional. It's just like, this is some facts for you. And so that is the kind of thing that Clean Wisconsin does, and anybody can do when they encounter something that is maybe not quite right, not telling the whole story. It's unusual to find misinformation that is just like blatant falsehoods. It's often a little bit of fact and a little bit of fiction together, a little bit of fact, a little bit of fiction. And that can be really hard to parse out. So being able to counter the fictional part, or to provide a little perspective, or just give additional context to something can be helpful, and is also really important to do. Next slide. And that's it. So that's my part.
Thank you, Amy. Yeah, so that is the content we wanted to share today. I'm going to stop sharing this, and then maybe we could get into some questions if we've got any.
Great, yes, we do. And I'm going to go ahead and start working through some of these. Maybe one that relates to some of what Amy was just talking about. And this question is, would you say most of us are more or less conflict averse? And I guess that would apply to sort of engaging in these different formats.
I mean, all the things that I put about being in a small community can lead you to be conflict averse. You know, you're in a small space, you know these people, you see people every day, and you don't want to have like conflict. That's why I think leaning on, here's a fact that might be good, and then not arguing, but just kind of like very gently pushing back, very gently stating why you feel a certain way or why something is important to you. It's a hard balance, but that's the best course, I think.
Great, thank you, Amy. Another question about sort of communication and impact. What is more impactful for submitting comments to the PSC? Is it quantity, getting lots of regular people to submit comments, or quality, getting just a few organizations submitting thoughtful expert commentary?
Want me to take that one, Amy? So to some extent, I think there's a numbers game. There's a matter of seeing, the staff are looking through this, commissioners are looking through it, the public comments, and they're trying to get a sense of, is this kind of balance? Is it very skewed in one direction? So, it is true that having a good number of comments in support that can, balance out any negative comments, or demonstrate, if there's overwhelming support, for example. I think that is very helpful. You know, that said, the content itself matters as well. You know, the kinds of ways that you can identify yourself as a credible source, as really having a stake in the project outcome. You know, if you can say, look, I'm from one of these local communities, and I understand that it's going to bring, you know, this money to our community that we could use for these critical things that are underfunded. You know, we've got this impaired water. I can't drink my well water because of, you know, runoff. And so I support it for this reason. I think those kinds of comments really hold a lot of weight. You know, it is definitely impactful for the bigger organizations or groups that can actually intervene in the docket, because then they can dig really deep and be able to offer expert analysis and testimony. And that just goes beyond what, you know, an individual is going to be able to do on their own. So maybe it's a cop out, but I'd say it's a little bit of a balance. You know, we kind of need all of the above, but I would not discount that, you know, you as just a member of the public who cares about this, that like, that doesn't matter. It absolutely does. And being able to submit that comment and get it on the record and show your support and your thoughts is very impactful.
Great, thanks, Chelsea. A couple of questions that are a little bit more technical. One, are we seeing 99 megawatt projects to get around the PSC? And then, well, maybe we'll start with that one.
There are 99 megawatt projects. The regulatory environment in Wisconsin is that for a project over 100 megawatts, it goes for approval to the Public Service Commission. Less than 99 happens locally at the county level. So, you know, I'm not a developer or a utility, and I am not designing project size. Maybe that comes into play. I think a lot of times they're trying to design the best project for the area. And so I think that's mostly what dictates the size. But you know, it's different processes. So with the Public Service Commission route, you've got this whole docket, you know, all the interveners, the testimony, and all these hearings. And so it's like a big, the environmental review, it's a very big elaborate process. You know, there's a different process at the local level. And that puts, you know, the county more in the decision-making role versus the Public Service Commission. So I don't know necessarily that it's like nefarious if they're trying to pick one or the other. But, you know, they might be thinking about kind of which route makes more sense for the given project. Either way, there is a rigorous review process, and, you know, folks in the public sector, you know, your government officials or your, you know, agency heads, the commissioners that are making that decision based on the evidence. And there's, you know, ways for you to get involved.
Great. Another question related to renewable energy siting and learning more about plans anticipated there. Is there some way to search electric transfer stations to see property close by that is where solar companies would be interested?
So one question I hear a lot from people is, hey, that actually sounds pretty cool. I would like to be one of those farmers and diversify my income and have one of those solar leases. And unfortunately, it's not as simple as that. It's just sort of volunteering and say, please put it here. That question is getting at, you know, what folks are really looking for in siting projects is kind of the big three. Is it flat? Is the land dry? And is it by interconnection? And especially that last point is kind of the biggest deal breaker. I honestly am not sure about that exact request. But one thing that I'll say a couple things. One is there's a really cool website called Landgate that I heard about recently, actually through the Farmers Union. And they kind of describe themselves as the Zillow for land resources. And so it's kind of a resource you can go type in your address and it'll kind of assess how viable your property is for solar, as well as all kinds of other resources. It's got mining and all kinds of stuff on there. So it's just kind of getting a sense of, you know, what value your land has for these variety of things. And they also work with developers a lot. So that's one way that can kind of help suss out, like, if your property is in a place that might potentially work for a future project, can do a little bit of that matchmaking. But you can also, I'll plug, you know, Renew Wisconsin, I know has something on their website where you can fill out a form, I think, and they will connect you with some developers. When we did these solar tours recently with One Energy, which is the developer of those couple of projects, they, you know, were talking about they're open to hearing from landowners, but just not to set any false expectations. I think, Katie, you cited the stat earlier this week. I think they said maybe 1 in 200 or so is like the perfect fit for them. So it tends to be more the other way around, where the developers will approach, you know, a landowner rather than the other way around. But that's not to say it can't happen. And I definitely recommend looking at that resource. And I also want to re-emphasize that you know, solar can be a really great deal for, you know, individual farmers wanting to diversify their income, help keep their family on the land. But there really are true community economic community-wide benefits, and that's that utility aid fund payment that I referenced earlier too. So you know, sometimes I hear people thinking about this as sort of like a, you know, there's one lucky person and then everyone else is just kind of missing out, but they're looking at the panels, but they're not getting the income. But yeah, I do want to emphasize that, like, you are indirectly benefiting, even if it's not on your land. The utility aid fund goes, it gets split across the town hosting the project and the whole county. So even if you're in the same county as a project, you're getting some money into your public fund.
Excellent. Another question, do you have suggestions for ways that urban dwellers can interact with folks in rural communities in ways that mitigate the current urban-rural divide renewable energy?
I mean, I think there's like books written about that, maybe not on renewables specifically, but yeah, I mean, I think with anyone just trying to engage civilly on a conversation, finding areas of common ground. I think trying to avoid this like winners versus losers question. You know, I think like anyone's gonna have distrust of, you know, someone coming into their community who maybe doesn't fully understand the area, you know, the local you know, sources of joy and pride, the, you know, local challenges that folks are facing. So I'd say, generally speaking, always coming with a, you know, open mind and curiosity. I'd say try to listen more than you talk is usually a good rule of thumb for anyone, just so you're kind of really understanding what it's like to be in somebody else's shoes and the valid concerns that they might have. You know, something different is going to resonate with every person. You know, some folks in rural areas don't want to talk about climate change, and they want to talk about, you know, energy independence, clean energy, saving costs and things like that. Sometimes you can talk about weather. You know, farmers are, I know, because yesterday I was out in the field in the heat with the over 100-degree heat index, sweating my way through a workday trying to get our delivery out. So more than many professions, farmers and folks living in rural communities, you know, folks that are outdoor workers are very impacted by what our weather is like. When we know we're going to see more extreme heat, that's concerning, not only for workers, for, you know, folks with dairies, you know, for the cows, it hurts milk production, there's increased pest pressure. Fortunately, it hasn't been bad this summer, but last summer, all the wildfire smoke that was coming in from Canada that we're breathing, I was out in the field wearing a mask some days because it was so unhealthy. So I think if you know, this again goes across anyone, not just like a rural urban divide, but just when you're trying to find common ground with someone, you've got to meet them where they're at, and be willing to kind of first listen, understand where they're at, and have them offer that to you and not make assumptions for them. But then also, you know, speak to their lived experience and issues that are really going to move them, because they're the experts of their own lives, and so it's important to, I think, be deferential to that.
Thanks, Chelsea. We have a comment in here today that I think is worth sharing about, and this is from one of our sort of partner organizations, which is Farm to Power, a nonprofit that works on behalf of farmers and collects testimonial stories that they're sharing to their website and social media. And Maddie has been meeting with farmers who are supportive of renewables across Wisconsin and would love to amplify your voice if you'd like to share your experience. She shared her email, and so I'll go ahead and just publish that comment so you can grab that if you'd like from the Q&A section. And then I will go ahead and bop to the next comment here, or question. Are we ready in Wisconsin to install solar panels that can be farmed underneath? For example, being able to turn the panels at a 90-degree angle so a tractor and equipment could run through it, and hay, for example, or harvest under the panels. This person is a solar sheep grazer, and it would require a lot of sheep to graze with this solar goal in Wisconsin. And yeah, a couple more questions about agrivoltaics.
Yeah, so agrivoltaics are a really hot topic right now as people are trying to explore, you know, how to like maximize integrating solar and farming. My understanding from talking with developers is that a lot of them are really interested, and they're trying to explore what is possible when it comes to doing things like integrating animals. One thing that a lot of us learned on the solar tour recently was that there are some challenges to lifting panels up higher. So sheep have been proven to work effectively with solar panels. Some people ask, well, what about cows? You've got to lift them up higher to have cows be able to fit under there. And when you put it up higher, you have to dig down lower to make sure that your panels are stable and safe and, you know, up to all those requirements. And turns out when you have to dig much lower, a lot of times in Wisconsin, then you start hitting rock. And so then that gets prohibitive. So there are some kind of, you know, technical challenges like that I think folks are trying to work around. There have been some conversations around crops. Actually, UW-Madison Office of Sustainability is working. There's a research site right now where they're trying to figure out, you know, what kind of crops could go, what does spacing look like, how does it look to get equipment in there. So people are actively working on this. I've got this wild dream that I want to have solar ginseng because it needs shade cloth. So I'm thinking that's perfect. You've got the cover already, but I know there's some challenges too with the crop rotation. The solar panels are of course stable. As far as sheep, yeah, that comment there, that would require a lot of sheep, right? I also kind of joke that we might need to start increasing the market for lamb in Wisconsin and, you know, make that a more popular meat. I was talking with a grazer at the solar farm tour recently, and he was saying he's working on getting the first certified organic solar grazed lamb on the market, maybe even in the country. So that's an interesting angle as well. So I'd say there is demand, and it is only going to be growing. It makes sense from the land management perspective. Some people have herds that they like will move around because you don't actually need the herd there, you know, all the time. They're there for a number of weeks during the summer, and then they're moving on. So I think that there is a lot of opportunity and definitely a lot of interest in exploring more ways to integrate both animals and crops into these systems. I know when we heard from One Energy at the tour, they were so open to ideas. So.
Great. Thanks, Chelsea. And then lingering on this agrivoltaics for a second, someone asked, are there incentives being offered to farmers to implement practices such as grazing or planting pollinator habitat along with income incentives?
I'm trying to, I want to make sure I understand the question correctly, because it's incentives to farmers. Do you think that's related to like on the solar farms, or just kind of more generally?
Yeah, I think so. They're saying like the income incentives would be the solar, installing the solar. Would there be additional incentives, I think?
I mean, so
Meaning?
as part of the PSC process, you know, the developer and submitting their plan for the design of the project, they're talking about like what seed mixes that they want. So I know like Clean Wisconsin is part of our expert testimony. We've commented on that and said, you know, make sure you include these forbs so you've got flowering plants at different times of the year, so you can make sure you've got that abundant for pollinators. So there is definitely some opportunity to provide input on that. As far as incentives, you know, I don't know if there's, not that I'm aware of, other than just trying to, you know, do a well done project with good ground cover. I know that some other states have policies, have put like a pollinator scorecard out. I believe Minnesota recently adopted a requirement for kind of going through that. So there might be some more opportunities to incentivize and really encourage that in Wisconsin, because, you know, we see it's very nice to have a project like that that's not, you know, verdure. You've got the nice established habitat that's good for the soil and the pollinators and everyone. Hope I answered that okay.
Great. I've seen a couple sort of examples and questions come in showcasing some Minnesota-based farmer projects that are combining sort of a beginning farmer land access component, particularly for immigrant farmers, with solar land. And this is one of the areas where Renewing the Countryside is really interested, given our work in beginning farmer land access. So just wanted to kind of recognize those comments and give you an opportunity to share if you have any thoughts about sort of combining land access and solar.
Yeah, I think that's a win-win. You know, one of the biggest challenges in farming right now is both that we've got an, you know, aging workforce with the average age of a farmer nearing retirement, and at the same time, trouble with younger folks getting into the profession, and a big part of that is land access. So I think those kinds of creative solutions are really great for everybody. I don't have the details of those particular projects, but good on Minnesota for working on that, and I hope that we do here too.
Thanks, Chelsea. I think we have just a couple more little questions and we'll wrap it up. One, does Clean Wisconsin inform its subscribers of all new PSC big solar dockets that would be good for us to comment on?
So I can't promise all, you know, we will, if you subscribe to us, we will definitely keep you posted on what we think are some really key projects to support. There's a lot of activity, and just because of bandwidth issues, we can't engage in every single one. So if you really want comprehensive coverage, I would go through some of those steps I walked through on the PSC website. But if you don't feel like doing all that, which is totally fair, if you subscribe to our list, we'll keep you posted on some really important projects, both for solar and wind, and other things. Great.
And then just rounding it out, a great final question: when will the recording be available? We will send that as soon as we can after, I can't promise a specific date, but we'll send the recording and some slides out with anyone who registered. I think that's it.
Fantastic. Well, yeah, just again, want to thank everybody so much for your interest. If there's any lingering questions that we didn't have time to get to today, or any way that we can support you in, you know, taking any of these actions, please don't hesitate to reach out. Very much appreciate all of you.
Thank you so much, everyone.
Have a good day. Thanks.